Hello everybody, welcome to another Valheim video. Today you're going to be learning about the different kinds of triggers that you can react to with Expand World Prefabs. If you want to support my work, then consider renting your own dedicated Valheim server using my link, JP Valheim. Expand World Prefabs allows us to customize the Valheim server experience. You can use the moment any prefab gets created or destroyed as a trigger. And for this reason, it's wise to have a text file that just has all of the sound effects and all of the visual effects and FX in Valheim. Some things like this will stay around until the player leaves and comes back. Others will stay permanently, and most of them will just disappear shortly. And these are the simplest things that you can react to. Let's go with the Overciew destruction. Let's spawn it, see what it looks like. Alright, it looks like that. Now we're going to make a script that reacts to this being spawned. So we paste the prefab, and then we're going to use a type create because this happens when it's made. And then what we're going to do is we're going to spawn a ruby, right? Like that. Make sure you use spawns, not spawn. If you use spawn, you have to change the format so it's like this, okay? But we're not going to do it that way. For now, we're just going to do it this way because it is simpler. Save it, and now we can spawn the same command as earlier, but look at that. We get a ruby. Spawn it again, and again, and again, and look at that. We have 4 rubies. This is the most basic form of using a trigger. But this isn't the only way to use triggers. There's loads of other ways, so let's get into it. Have you ever noticed that players can jump? Well, what if you made that a trigger? Completely possible, because players and monsters and some other things all have this state. But to do that, we need to be able to identify the names of the different states, and they're not always intuitive. So we're going to make something that tells us. This is something Raka showed me how to do in the Valheim World Editing Discord. This is a very simple script. You don't need to understand all of it yet, because understanding the parameter part can be a little confusing. This script makes it so anytime the player goes into another state, the name of that state will show up in the chat. We can see that when we jump, it's just called jump. Okay, so if we equip something onto our hip, it puts us into another state. And if I build, we see it does a swing, so that does a state. And what if I use like a pickaxe? It shows the state of the pickaxe. That's how you can use this script to find the states for not just the player, but pretty much anything else that has a state, like a monster using an attack. You have to learn the names of those attack states. For our purposes, though, we've learned that the state to pay attention to is the jump state. So now we're going to spawn another ruby and another visual effects. And we've saved our file. We can scroll back and jump. Oh, look at that. We literally jump and get a ruby, but because the ruby spawns at the player, we automatically pick it up almost every time. Trippy. And so in this way, you can use a whole load of different attack states as the trigger. This is the beginning of how you would make some kind of custom attack. You would also need to add a filter that looks at the data to make sure that the right weapon is equipped, but that's a topic for another day. For now, we're going to move on to some other kinds of triggers, like using a treasure chest with a specific kind of item in it. To illustrate this mechanic, I'm going to be using a variation of Dakar's conveyor belt, which you can get on config share in the Valheim World Editing Discord. Let's look at an example. Here we have a conveyor chest. You see we can open the chest and see some custom text, and it says retrieve the following, 20 circling cores, and there's 2 slots. So here's our 20 circling cores. Let's add them to the chest. And then boom, look at that. It turns into something else. This is actually the beginning of the conveyor belt system that Dakar made, which you can grab. But that aside, you saw that we put something in and then it spawned this. It did something else entirely. I won't even get into what this does because you're not ready for it. It's going to blow your mind. But as you saw, we started with a wooden chest. This script is a little bit more complicated because it needs some data. It has to know, okay, when you put something in the chest, is it the right thing? What is the chest supposed to have? You have to give it an example of the right thing using data. Here's the main part of what's going on that you need to understand. We have the label of the area, and then the prefab that we are reacting to. In this case, it's the sound effects of a closed chest. When it gets created, we are making sure that there is a wooden chest in the area that has this belt station cost. There's another file, a data file, that has this in it. Here is the data belt station cost, which is, it has the items, the container has the items, Surtling core in a 10 stack, Surtling core in a 10 stack. So here we can build the wooden chest. It gets replaced with the conveyor chest. That's all handled by this data here. We can see it's called Surtling core chest. It has the height, the width, and then also some strings that have the container name. This is where you add this other stuff. It's actually part of the text here. This is basically just like a big text box. So you spawn the chest in with that data. That makes it look like this. And now, whenever you close the chest, it plays a sound effects of the chest closing. So that will check and look for the Surtling cores. And that's being handled here by this belt station cost thing. It's looking for these 20 Surtling cores in the chest. Every time you close it, it's asking, are those there? Are those there? Are those there? Nothing's happening because nothing's there. But now, as soon as we put the cores in the chest and close it, boom, it reacts. Look at that. We have used the trigger. You'll be able to use what you've seen so far, or variations of it, to trigger in almost any situation you want. If you want to react to the player, there's even another advanced thing you can do called a player poker, which basically makes the player say where they are every couple of seconds, so then you can react to their proximity. Or you could just force the player to jump. That also works. That's one of the cool things about Expand World prefabs. There's usually many different ways to do all sorts of things. As you can see, there's a whole bunch of nonsense running around me that is all enabled with different kinds of Expand World prefab scripts. I mean, even if I die, look, there's an explosion. And then when you look in the chat, it noticed that the Diverger was close to me and said that they were there after I died. This is all Expand World prefabs and triggers. And here's an example of that. You saw we died, and even though I can loot my tombstone, there's still a record that I died here. This is something inspired by Dark Souls. You can see it shows a little skull thing, but it's not super obvious, right? Like if you're over here, it's not that obvious that it's there. But when you look at it, you can get more information and see that JP Valheim died here on day 358 of the year 33. If you want to get your own dedicated Valheim server to practice this sort of thing on, then you can use my link, JP Valheim, to get a server with Zap hosting. They offer pre-configured BepInEx servers, so all you have to do is change a config file and add in the Expand World Prefabs plugin, and I have all of the information available for you to do so. This server that you see behind me is a Zap server. Everything you see that I do with Expand World Prefabs has always been on a Zap server. So what you see is what you get. The world of Valheim modding has started to change drastically in this way, and most people don't even know about it. So if you want to do this sort of thing, just watch more of these kind of videos, join the Valheim World Editing Discord, and start learning more about what you can do with Valheim Expand World Prefabs.